Jim Morrison was a sensitive, generous, sometimes explosive, though often funny person. He was a brilliant singer-songwriter, performer, poet, filmmaker, and intellectual, a Renaissance man who became known to the world as the lead singer of The Doors. But Jim Morrison was also a special type of person, a secret teacher, someone who possesses a strong awareness of the realms beyond our seen reality. Jim felt his purpose was to wake us up to this unseen world, and, in his words, to deliver people from the limited ways in which they see and feel. The Western esoteric tradition is a colorful and adventurous history going back thousands of years. Jim first learned about the Western esoteric tradition from a book he discovered as a teenager, Kurt Seligman's The History of Magic and the Occult, originally titled The Mirror of Magic, then titled The History of Magic when Jim found it. Though there's no record of Jim discussing this work, he kept it for years before giving it away to his college friend, Ed Martin. Jim admired the ancient Greek military leader Alexander the Great. Alexander's boyhood teacher, the philosopher Aristotle, taught Alexander something critical about human nature, that all human beings possess a desire to know that includes this other reality. To satisfy our longing for knowledge, the ancient world's first great library was built in the city that Alexander the Great founded in 331 BCE, Alexandria, and would become the birthplace of the Western esoteric tradition. Within secret teachers like Jim, the desire to know is an unquenchable, roaring fire. Secret teachers feel compelled to follow it at all costs. This insatiable curiosity and hunger for knowledge was common to many of the Western esoteric tradition's most celebrated secret teachers, such as Hypatia of Hellenistic Alexandria, Giordano Bruno of Renaissance Italy, Jacob Boehme, John Dee, and many, many others. Jim's life was quite similar to these individuals, sharing many characteristics: a life that was rich with spiritual awakening, mystical experience, eccentricity, exceptional intelligence, instability of all kinds, alienation from society, timeless achievements, startling prophetic visions, extraordinary occult powers, a strong sense of what author Colin Wilson calls purpose and meaning, notoriety often bordering on pariah status, run-ins with authority, and persecution. Author Colin Wilson described the sudden awareness of this other reality as a peak experience. Wilson attributed the peak experience as the main source for some of the finest works of art ever created. Wilson recognized Vincent van Gogh's painting The Starry Night as perhaps the most brilliant example of one person's expression of this highly awakened state. Author G.K. Chesterton called peak experiences the absurd good news, and novelist John Steinbeck viewed peak experiences as the moments in our lives where we suddenly perceive the divine in everything. In his novel East of Eden, Steinbeck writes, "Sometimes a kind of glory lights up the mind of a man. It happens to nearly everyone. You can feel it growing or preparing like a fuse burning toward a fire. The world glows outside your eyes." William Blake, another poet Jim loved, also expressed the breathtaking mood of a peak experience in the first verse of his poem, Auguries of Innocence. To see the world in a grain of sand, and heaven in a wildflower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand, and eternity in an hour. This other reality is what Jim wants us to wake up to, as he says in the opening verse of his poetry album, An American Prayer. "Awake, shake dreams from your hair, my pretty child, my sweet one. Choose the day and choose the sign of your day, the day's divinity, first thing you see." Secret teachers are often sensitive people, and so is Jim. They're prone to coming down hard from their peak experiences, and because of their intense highs and lows, they often become alcoholics and drug addicts. They seek to replicate their peak experiences with substances and use them to cope with the deep depressions that often follow. They can also become suicidal and harbor dark, pessimistic outlooks on life. A year after painting The Starry Night, Van Gogh took his own life. Van Gogh wrote to his brother Theo, "I don't know if I'm extremely sensitive or if life is unbearable." Jim expressed a similar view of life in his poetry album An American Prayer, stating, "Could any hell be more horrible than now and real?" Doors guitarist Robbie Krieger recalled an evening in which both Doors drummer John Densmore and himself spent hours talking Jim out of committing suicide. Jim decided to take a walk just before dawn. When Jim came back, he had a big smile on his face. His mood had completely changed. Jim showed them the lyrics he'd written on his walk that would become the Doors song People Are Strange. The person who wanted to kill himself just hours earlier had vanished. Jim was influenced by an impressive array of philosophical, literary, cinematic, and historical luminaries. Their lives and works helped him to form his artistic vision and his rock and roll persona. Chief among these were the writings of philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, both the spectacular life of T.E. Lawrence and the elegant historical epic film Lawrence of Arabia, the confrontational and dramatic art of playwright Antonin Artaud, and Mircea Eliade's work Shamanism, Archaic Techniques of Ecstasy. Jim would fuse these influences together into his art, along with so much else that he learned during his 8 years of high school and college. Jim graduated from UCLA's film school in 1965 and began living the life of a homeless poet in the Los Angeles beach towns of Santa Monica and Venice. In the beginning of their hero's journey, a secret teacher's strong connection to that other reality often leads them to become what Colin Wilson describes in his first book, The Outsider, as the modern romantic rebel. The rebel outsider is a complicated individual who chooses to live apart from everyday life on the fringes of society. This way they can be in intimate contact with their intense inner lives and their peak experiences with as little distraction as possible and discover ways to express their connection to this other reality in solitude. Jim, a secret teacher cast in the classic romantic character of the rebel outsider in 1960s Los Angeles, just wanted to move on, to learn to forget as he sings on Soul Kitchen and to find his own artistic voice. Jim's spiritual awakening, which had been steadily building in momentum since his high school years, quickly intensified to great heights. Jim was also taking large doses of LSD, consuming other drugs in dangerous quantities, and picking fights with police officers and hoodlums in which he received brutal beatings. This was Jim's way of testing the bounds of reality, as he put it, and acting on Arthur Rimbaud's poetic manifesto that called for a long, prolonged derangement of the senses so he could attain self-knowledge and become a thief of fire. The symbolist lyric style, shamanic philosophic stance, and vagabond rebellion that Jim picked up from reading and learning about Rimbaud were the most powerful artistic forces in Jim's life, ones with roots in symbolism's vast occult influences. They enabled Jim to see that rock music would be a unique way of expressing his strong connection to that other reality. Even though Jim had no formal training in music and did not play an instrument, he was quite musical. He composed songs that were powerful enough to blow away fellow Doors founder Ray Manzarek, a seasoned keyboardist. Jim once stated that many Doors songs, such as Moonlight Drive, came to him as a fantastic rock concert going on his mind, that he was just there simply taking notes to what he heard. Everyone thought Ray was insane to be in a band with someone as unstable as Jim. But Ray saw Jim's musical genius, his talent for writing poetic lyrics, and his great potential for rock stardom, so Ray decided to go all in with Jim, and they formed the Doors together in the summer of 1965. According to Robbie Krieger in his book Set the Night on Fire, unlike other rock stars of his era, the person Jim was on stage was also who he was off stage, making Jim perhaps the most authentic rock star of any generation. The reptilian dreamlike aura of the Lizard King image that Jim created was meant to reflect his very, very old soul. It intensified his mysterious personality and captivated the imagination of Doors fans around the world. Jim's Alexander the Great-like intensity gives Jim a prominent place in the Western esoteric tradition. Break On Through to the Other Side is the first song on the Doors' first album, and it tells the listener straight up what the Doors are all about. Jim would completely devote himself to his secret teacher's mission to wake us up to our glories, our divinity, where the true gold is found. Humanity needs tough, daring, bold awakened leaders of the soul, like Jim, to free us from living our lives on autopilot, what Colin Wilson called the robot that's in all of us. But this evolution from ordinary consciousness into cosmic consciousness has been viewed throughout history as a threatening state of mind. This often placed a secret teacher in precarious situations with the moral authorities of their day. Author Gary Lachman writes in The Secret Teachers of the Western World that in 1623, French polymath Morrison's tract Questiones Celeberrime in Genesum contributed to ending the momentum of the Italian Renaissance's occult and esoteric influences, such as the Corpus Hermeticum, rendering all belief in cosmic consciousness not only suspect, but viewed as a form of insanity. This in turn made life difficult for secret teachers all the way up until Jim's time. And Jim would pay a high price for sharing his secret teacher's message. America's tough conservative establishment didn't like Jim's strong influence on America's youth. Jim's message of cosmic consciousness and the religious fervor he created among his fans were viewed as threatening to both the social and the moral order. To make matters worse, Jim was the eldest son of one of America's most outstanding officers, Rear Admiral George Morrison, who at one point offered his resignation from the American Navy, feeling that Jim's public arrests were causing both himself and the Navy too much embarrassment. Indeed, the FBI, headed by the much-feared J. Edgar Hoover, had been keeping a watchful eye on Jim, amassing an 80-plus page file on him. Jim was arrested for allegedly exposing himself at a Doors concert in Miami, Florida on the evening of March 1st, 1969. Though during Jim's trial, not one photograph of the thousands submitted as evidence showed Jim exposing himself, and none of the witnesses who testified could recall seeing Jim expose himself to the audience that night. But one fall day in October 1970, Jim found himself being falsely convicted of crimes he did not commit, facing prison time in a Florida correctional facility he might not walk out of alive, the notorious Rayford Prison, a fate he knew was possible. This scared Jim and caused him much anxiety while he was living in Paris in 1971, still free on bond pending his appeal. Things happened fast in Jim Morrison's life. When he was 3 years old, Jim came upon a deadly traffic accident while out on a road trip with his family in New Mexico. Jim strongly felt that the dying native workers he saw had entered his soul and remained there for the rest of his life. Jim's spiritual awakening began to gather momentum when he was a teenager in high school while dating his first girlfriend, Tandy Martin. From that time on, the intensity of Jim's connection to that other reality only grew stronger with each passing year. While beginning college in Florida, his second girlfriend, Mary Werbelow, took Jim to a church where they shared an experience that haunted both Jim and Mary for the rest of their lives. Jim became an internationally famous rock star at age 22 while in the company of the love of his life, Pamela Corson. Then, on July 3, 1971, at the age of just 27, Jim passed away.